The stars looked different from this part of the galaxy. Daniel Carter stood near the observation window of the starward horizon and watched the alien world grow larger as the ship moved closer. The planet was beautiful in a strange way. Its surface was covered with purple forest and silver oceans that caught the light of three distant suns. Daniel was not a soldier. He was not a scientist. He was simply a man who was good at talking to people and understanding them. Back on Earth, he had worked as a counselor for troubled youth. He had spent years listening to angry teenagers, scared children, and broken families. He had learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was simply be present and listen. The United Earth government had chosen him for this mission because of these skills. They called him a cultural liaison. His job was to help the military officers and politicians understand the aliens they were about to meet. More importantly, his job was to help the aliens understand humans. The Valorans were one of the oldest species in the known galaxy. They had built an empire that stretched across 1,000 star systems. Their technology was far beyond anything humans had ever created. Their ships could cross the galaxy in days. Their weapons could destroy entire planets, and for the past 50 years they had been at war with the Galactic Coalition, a group of younger species that included humanity. The war had cost millions of lives on both sides. But now finally there was a chance for peace. The Valoran Empress had agreed to meet with a human diplomatic team. No one knew why she had chosen humans. Specifically, the Valorans had always called humans primitive and weak. They had mocked human emotions and human bodies, but for some reason the Empress wanted to talk to them. Daniel turned away from the window and walked through the ship toward the briefing room. The corridors were busy with crew members preparing for arrival. He passed soldiers checking their weapons, diplomats reviewing their notes, and technicians running final system checks. Everyone was nervous. This mission could change everything. In the briefing room, Ambassador Lisa Monroe stood at the front, pointing at a holographic display of the Valoran Palace. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had spent 30 years negotiating with alien species, and she was considered the best diplomat humanity had. The Valorans are insectoids, she explained to the team. They evolved from a hive species similar to Earth's ants or bees. Their society is built around the queen, who is both their political leader and their biological mother. Every Valoran alive today is descended from Queen Satara. Daniel listened carefully. He had studied the Valorans for months, but hearing the information again helped him focus. They communicate through a combination of spoken language and chemical signals called pheromones. Lisa continued, this means they can sense emotions in ways we cannot. They will know if you are lying. They will know if you are afraid. The best strategy is to remain calm and honest at all times. A young officer raised his hand. What about physical contact? Should we avoid touching them? Lisa nodded. Absolutely. Valorans consider uninvited physical contact to be extremely offensive. Do not shake hands. Do not pat. Do not touch anything in the palace without permission. They see humans as dirty and primitive. We need to prove them wrong. Daniel made a mental note of this. He understood that every culture had its own rules about personal space and touch. He would be careful. The ship entered orbit around the Valoran home. Whirled, an hour later, a shuttle carried the diplomatic team down to the surface, where they landed on a platform made of something that looked like glass but was harder than steel. The air was thin and cold with a strange smell that reminded Daniel of flowers and metal mixed together. The palace rose before them like a mountain of crystal. Its towers reached toward the sky, catching the light and breaking it into rainbows. Thousands of Valorans moved across bridges and walkways that connected the towers. They were tall creatures, nearly 7 feet in height, with 4 arms and 2 legs. Their bodies were covered in hard shells that shimmered with colors that changed as they moved. Their faces had large compound eyes that seemed to see everything at once. A group of Valoran guards approached the human team. They wore armor that looked like it was grown rather than built, and they carried weapons that hummed with energy. The lead guard spoke in a clicking voice that was translated by a small device hanging from his neck. The Empress will see you now. Follow. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not wander. Do not touch. The humans followed the guards into the palace. Daniel walked near the back, the group watching everything carefully. He noticed how the Valorans moved smooth and efficient like machines. He noticed how they looked at the humans with curiosity and disgust mixed together. He noticed how clean everything was, how ordered, how perfect. And then he noticed something else, a sound very faint, almost hidden beneath the echo of footsteps and the hum of machinery. It was a high-pitched cry, like a baby wailing. It came from somewhere deep inside the palace, rising and falling in waves of distress. Daniel looked around to see if anyone else had heard it. The other humans seemed focused on the guards and the architecture. The Valoran showed no reaction at all, as if the sound did not exist, but it did exist. Daniel could hear it clearly now. Something was crying, something was in pain, and no one was doing anything about it. He felt a strange pull in his chest. It was the same feeling he used to get when one of his younger siblings was hurt or scared. It was the instinct to help, to comfort, to make things better. He had felt it 1,000 times before, but never in a place like this. The diplomatic team entered a massive throne room where Queen Stir waited. She was enormous, twice the size of the other Valorans, and she sat on a throne made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. Her shell was deep purple, almost black, and her eyes reflected the light like mirrors. Ambassador Lisa stepped forward and bowed. Your Majesty, we are honored by your invitation. We come in peace, seeking an end to the conflict between our peoples. The Queen studied the humans for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was deep and cold. We shall see if peace is possible. Humans are strange creatures, weak in body, short in life, ruled by feelings rather than logic. But perhaps that is why wish to meet you. Perhaps your weakness is also your strength. Daniel listened to her words, but his attention kept drifting to the distant crying. It was still there, still calling out, still waiting for someone to answer. He wondered if anyone ever would. The negotiations began the next morning in a chamber filled with floating lights and walls that seemed to breathe. Daniel sat at the back of the human delegation, watching and listening as Ambassador Lisa and Queen Sithara discussed borders, trade routes, and reparations for the war. The talks were slow and careful, with each word chosen like a chess move, but Daniel found it hard to concentrate. The crying had not stopped. If anything, it had grown louder. Overnight, he could hear it echoing. Through the crystal walls, a constant background noise that none of the Valorans acknowledged. It was driving him crazy. He watched Queen Satara closely. She was impressive and terrifying, a creature of pure authority, an ancient power, but something was wrong with her. Her movements were slower than they should be. Her eyes kept drifting toward a door at the side of the chamber. Her responses to Ambassador Lisa's questions came with small delays, as if her mind was somewhere else. The Valorant advisors noticed it too. They exchanged quick glances with each other, communicating in ways that humans could not understand. Their pheromones filled the air with signals that Daniel could not read, but he could sense the tension. Something was happening in this palace that the Valorans did not want the humans to know about. During a break-in the negotiations, Daniel walked through the halls with careful steps. He had been told not to wander, but he needed to understand what was happening. The crying pulled at him like a rope tied around his heart. He followed the sound through corridors of crystal and light, past guards who watched him with suspicious eyes but did not stop him. He found a young Valorant servant cleaning a window near one of the inner doors. She was smaller than the others, probably not fully grown, and her shell was a soft blue color. When she saw Daniel approaching, she froze with fear. "I am not going to hurt you," Daniel said softly. He kept his hands visible and his movements slow. "I just want to ask a question, please." The servant looked around nervously. "Humans are not supposed to be in this area. You should return to the delegation chamber." "I know," Daniel said, "but I hear something." A crying sound. "It has been going on since we arrived. Can you tell me what it is?" The servant's eyes widened. She looked at the door behind her, then back at Daniel. For a moment he thought she would run away, but instead she spoke in a whisper so quiet that he had to lean closer to hear. "It is the princess, the Queen's newborn daughter. She has been crying for 16 hours now. Nothing can make her stop." Daniel felt his heart tighten. 16 hours? Is she sick? Is she hurt? The servant shook her head. "Healers do not know what is wrong. Valorant infants do not cry like this. We communicate through pheromones from birth. Sound is for emergencies only. But the princess will not stop. She cries and cries and cries. The healers have tried everything. Medicine, music, different temperatures, different foods. Nothing works. And the Queen?" Daniel asked. "The Queen is suffering." A Valorant mother feels everything her child feels. The princess's distress is the Queen's distress. That is why Her Majesty seems weak during the negotiations. She has not slept. She cannot think clearly. She's terrified that her daughter will die. Daniel stood in silence for a moment, processing the information. He thought about his own childhood, about the nights when his baby sister would cry for hours and nothing seemed to help. He remembered how exhausted his mother would become, how desperate, how scared. He remembered the moment when he, just a teenager at the time, had taken his sister from his mother's arms and held her against his chest. He remembered humming a song and rocking slowly back and forth. He remembered the miracle of silence when the crying finally stopped. "Why won't anyone help?" Daniel asked. "Surely there must be something that can be done." The servant's expression became sad. "Valorans do not comfort each other. The way humans do. We do not hold, we do. Not rock, we do not sing. These things are considered primitive and unnecessary. Our young are raised in nurseries by machines and servants. The mother provides genetic material and pheromone guidance, but physical contact is rare. Daniel stared at her. You mean Valoran? Mothers don't hold their babies, not in the way humans do. No, it is not our way. Daniel thought about this for a long time. He thought about all the research he had read about human infants, how they needed touch to survive, how babies who were not held could actually die from loneliness. He thought about how human evolution had built a deep need for physical connection into every cell of the human body, and he wondered if maybe, just maybe, this Valorian princess needed something that her own people could not give her. Thank you for telling me, Daniel said to the servant. I won't forget your kindness. He walked back to the delegation chamber with his mind racing. The crying followed him like a shadow, growing louder and then softer. As he moved through the hallways, he knew he should focus on the peace talks. He knew he should stay in his place and do his job, but he could not stop thinking about that baby. That evening, the negotiations paused for dinner. The humans were given a suite of rooms in one of the palace towers with windows that looked out over the purple forests. Below, Daniel sat alone on a balcony, watching the three suns set one by one, painting the sky in colors he had never seen before. Ambassador Lisa found him there an hour later. She sat down beside him with a tired sigh. You seem distracted, she said. Is something wrong? Daniel hesitated. Then he told her everything. He told her about the crying, about the princess, about what the servant had said. He told her about his idea, his crazy, impossible idea. Lisa listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. You want to offer to help with the Queen's baby, she said finally. A baby that belongs to the most powerful alien in the galaxy. A baby that we have been told nothing about. A baby that we are not even supposed to know exists. Yes, Daniel said simply. Lisa shook her head slowly. Daniel, this could destroy everything. The Valorans are proud. They would see this as an insult, a primitive human thinking he can do what their healers cannot. The Queen could throw us out. She could restart the war. Millions could die because of your good intentions. I know, Daniel said, but I can also hear that baby crying, and I know in my bones that I can help her. I don't know how to explain it. It's just something I feel. Lisa looked at him for a long time. She had known Daniel for 3 years, and she had learned to trust his instincts. He was not a foolish man. He did not take unnecessary risks. If he believed this strongly in something, there was usually a good reason. If you do this, she said slowly, and it goes wrong, I will not be able to protect you. You will be on your own. Daniel nodded. I understand. Lisa stood up and walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the frame. I'm not giving you permission, she said, but I'm also not stopping you. Whatever you decide to do, do it carefully and do it with respect. Then she was gone, and Daniel was alone with the distant sound of crying and the weight of a decision that could change everything. Daniel did not sleep that night. He lay on the strange alien bed, staring at the ceiling that glowed with soft bioluminescent light, and listened to the crying that never stopped. Every few minutes the sound would grow weaker, And he would think that maybe the princess had finally found peace, but then it would start again, stronger than before, filled with a desperation that made his heart ache. He thought about his family back on Earth. He thought about his mother, who had died when he was 16, leaving him to raise 3 younger siblings on his own. He thought about his father, who had died 2 years before that in a mining accident. He thought about little Sophie, who had been only 2 years old when their mother passed, and how she had cried every night for months because she did not understand why Mama was not coming home. Daniel had been the one to comfort Sophie during those terrible nights. He had held her in his arms and rocked her gently. He had sung the same lullaby their mother used to sing, a simple melody about stars and dreams and being safe. He had learned that babies did not need words or explanations. They needed warmth, they needed rhythm. They needed the feeling of being held by someone who loved them. He wondered if anyone had ever held the Valoran princess like that. He wondered if anyone had ever shown her what it felt like to be safe. When the first sun rose over the horizon, Daniel made his decision. He got out of bed, washed his face with the strange water that smelled like flowers, and put on clean clothes. He looked at himself in the mirror of ordinary human man with tired eyes and a 2-day beard, and wondered what the Valorans would think when they saw him. He left his room and walked through the quiet corridors of the palace. Most of the Valorans were still in their rest cycles, and the halls were empty except for a few guards who watched him pass. With cold eyes, he followed the sound of crying, letting it guide him through turns and stairways until he reached the door, made of solid crystal. 2 massive guards stood on either side of the door. They were the biggest Valorans Daniel had ever seen, with shells that were almost completely black and eyes that glowed with inner light. They carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. Daniel stopped a respectful distance away and bowed his head. He had practiced this moment in his mind 100 times during the long night. He knew he had to be careful. He knew he had to be humble. One wrong word could end everything. I am Daniel Carter of the human delegation, he said in a calm voice. I wish to speak with someone about the princess. The guards did not move. Their compound eyes studied him like he was an insect to be crushed. Royal chambers are forbidden to outsiders, one of them said. His voice was like gravel scraping against stone. Return to your quarters, human. Daniel did not move. I understand that I am not welcome here. I understand that I am breaking your rules by coming to this door, but I have something to offer. Something that might help. The second guard stepped forward, towering over Daniel like a mountain. You have nothing that we need. Your primitive species has nothing to teach us. Go away before we are forced to remove you. Daniel took a deep breath. This was the moment. This was where everything could fall apart or come together. He chose his words with extreme care. I mean no disrespect to your people or your queen. I do not claim to be better or wiser than your healers, but I come from a species that has spent thousands of years learning how to comfort crying children. We have techniques that are different from yours, ways of holding, ways of moving, ways of making sound. I do not know if they will work on the princess, but I am asking please for a chance to try. The guards looked at each other. Something passed between them in the silent language of pheromones that Daniel could not understand. Then one of them turned and disappeared through the crystal door, leaving Daniel alone with the other. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The crying continued, rising and falling behind the door like waves on a shore. Daniel stood perfectly still, keeping his hands visible and his expression calm. He could feel his heart beating fast in his chest, but he did not let the fear show on his face. Finally, the door opened. Again, the guard emerged and looked down at Daniel with an expression that might have been surprise. "The Queen has agreed to see you," he said. "Follow, do not speak unless spoken to. Do not touch anything. If you make any threatening movement, you will be killed instantly." Daniel nodded and followed the guard through the door. The chamber beyond was nothing like he expected. It was not a throne room or a medical facility. It was a nursery, a vast space filled with soft lights and gentle colors and machines that hummed with quiet energy. In the center of the room stood a cluster of Valorans in white robes, the healers. Daniel guessed, all looking exhausted and defeated, and there in the middle of them all was Queen Cythera. She looked terrible. Her great shell had lost its shine and her eyes were dull with exhaustion. She held something small and pale in her forearms, creature no bigger than a human baby, with a soft shell that had not yet hardened and tiny limbs that trembled with each cry. The princess, the crying was overwhelming. This close, it filled the room like water, drowning out all other sound. Daniel felt his eyes sting with tears, not from sadness but from the pure intensity of the infant's distress. Queen Cythera looked at Daniel with eyes that held no pride, no anger, no coldness. There was only desperation, only the raw primal fear of a mother watching her child suffer. "You are the human who claims he can help," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "My advisors say I am foolish to let you near my daughter. They say humans are dirty and dangerous and cannot be trusted, but I have tried everything else. I have watched my child scream for 18 hours. I have felt her pain in my own body until I thought I would die from it." She took a shaky breath. "So I am asking you, human, can you really help her, or are you just another false hope?" Daniel looked at the tiny creature in the queen's arms. He looked at the trembling limbs and the soft shell and the small mouth that opened and closed with each cry. He saw not an alien princess but a baby, just a baby, scared and lonely and desperate for something she could not name. "I don't know if I can help," Daniel said honestly, "but I promise to try. I promise to treat her with gentleness and respect. I promise that I will not hurt her." The queen studied him for a long moment, then slowly she took a step forward. "Then try," she said. "Try, human. Because if you fail, I do not know what I will do." She held out her arms, offering her daughter to a stranger from a primitive world, and Daniel, with hands that shook only slightly, reached out to receive her. The princess was lighter than Daniel expected. Her small body weighed almost nothing in his arms, like holding a bundle of feathers wrapped in silk. Her shell was soft and warm, not hard and cool like the adult Valorans, and she was shaking, trembling with each cry, like a leaf in a storm. Daniel brought her close to his chest, pressing her gently against the warmth of his body. The healers around him gasped. Physical contact like this was not done in Valoran society. It was primitive. It was wrong. Several of them stepped forward as if to stop him, but Queen Satara raised one of her arms and they froze in place. Let him try, she said. Her voice was barely audible over the crying dot. Daniel closed his eyes and focused on the baby in his arms. He blocked out the strange room and the alien eyes watching him. He blocked out his fear and his doubt. He let himself sink into the same calm space he had found so many times before, holding Sophie during those terrible nights. After their mother died, he began to sway, just a gentle movement side to side like the rocking of a boat on calm water. It was instinctive, natural, something humans had done for thousands of generations. The motion created a rhythm, a pattern that the body could recognize and trust. The crying continued, but Daniel did not stop. He knew that comfort was not instant. It was a process, a conversation between two bodies that did not need words. He adjusted his hold, cradling the princess so that her small head rested against his chest, right over his heart. The human heart beats about 70 times per minute, a steady rhythm that never stops, that never fails. Daniel knew from his training that infants could hear and feel this rhythm. It reminded them of being inside their mother's body when they were safe and warm, and the heartbeat was the only sound in the universe. The princess's cries began to change. They were still loud, still desperate, but there was something different in them now, a question, perhaps a hesitation, as if she was noticing something new and trying to understand what it meant. Daniel began to hum. It was the lullaby his mother used to sing, a simple melody with no words, just notes that rose and fell like breath. He hummed softly, letting the vibration travel from his chest into the small body pressed against it. The sound mixed with the heartbeat, creating a double rhythm that wrapped around the baby like a blanket. The room was completely silent except for Daniel's humming and the princess's crying. Every Valoran watched with wide eyes, their bodies frozen in shock and fascination. Queen Sarah had not moved. She stood like a statue, her gaze locked on her daughter with an intensity that was almost painful to see. Slowly, minute by minute, the crying began to fade. Screams became wails. The wails became whimpers. The whimpers became soft sounds that were almost like sighs. And then finally there was silence. Princess Velith had stopped crying. She lay against Daniel's chest, her small limbs relaxed, her breathing slow and steady. Her eyes, which had been squeezed shut with distress, opened slowly, revealing irises that shimmered with colors Daniel had never seen before. She looked up at him with curiosity, studying his strange, soft face and his small eyes and his weird, pale skin. Then she made a sound, a small chirp, like a bird greeting the morning sun. It was not a cry, it was something else entirely, something that sounded almost like contentment. One of the healers made a choking noise. That sound, she whispered, that is the sound of comfort. I have never heard the princes make that sound before. Queen Sithara took a step forward. A great body was trembling, and liquid gathered in the corners of her compound, iced tears. Daniel realized with shock Valorans could cry. How? She asked. Her voice cracked on the word. How did you do that? Daniel continued to sway gently, keeping the rhythm going even as he spoke. Humans are born helpless, he explained softly. Our babies cannot walk or feed themselves for months. They cannot survive alone, so evolution gave us ways to comfort them, ways to tell Them that they are not alone, that they are safe, that someone is there to protect them. He looked down at the small princess in his arms. She had closed her eyes and was making soft, humming sounds of her own, as if trying to copy the melody he had sung. We hold them against our hearts so they can feel our heartbeat. We rock them to remind them of being carried in the womb. We hum and sing because rhythm and melody calm the nervous system. And we keep them warm because warmth means life. He raised his eyes to meet the queen's gaze. Your daughter is not so different from a human baby. She needed the same things: warmth, rhythm, the feeling of being held by someone who would not let her go. The queen was silent for a long moment. The tears were flowing freely down her face now, leaving wet trails on her shell. She looked at her daughter, really looked at her, and something in her expression shifted. It was as if she was seeing the child for the first time. We do not hold our young, she said quietly. It is not our way. We believe that physical contact makes children weak, that they must learn to be independent from the moment of birth. That comfort is a crutch that will them later in life. She paused, and her voice dropped to barely whisper, but perhaps we were wrong. The queen stepped closer until she was standing right in front of Daniel. Up close, she was terrifying, a giant creature of shell and claw and ancient power, but her eyes were soft now, filled with wonder and grief and something that looked like hope. May I try? She asked. Daniel nodded and carefully transferred the princess into the queen's arms. He showed her how to hold the baby against her chest, how to support the small head, how to sway with the gentle rhythm. The queen was awkward. At first, her forearms did not move the way human arms did, but she learned quickly. When the princess felt her mother's body around her, she made another chirping sound. This one was different, louder, more insistent. And then she pressed her small face against her mother's chest and let out a long sigh of pure peace. Queen Satara began to cry again, but this time the tears were not from despair. They were from something else entirely, something she had perhaps never felt before. She knows me, the queen whispered. She knows I am her mother. She's not afraid. Daniel stepped back and watched as the most powerful creature in the galaxy stood in the middle of the nursery, holding her baby daughter for the first time in her life. The healers watched in stunned silence. The guards had lowered their weapons. And in that moment, something changed. Something that had been broken for a very long time began to heal. Daniel did not say anything. He did not need to. Some moments were too important for words. He simply stood there watching a mother and daughter discover each other and felt grateful that he had been allowed to help. The news spread through the palace like fire through dry grass. By the time Daniel returned to the human delegation's quarters, every Valor in the building knew what had happened. The human who had silenced the princess, primitive creature who had done what 100 healers could not, the soft, weak being who had somehow known the secret to comfort. Ambassador Lisa was waiting for him in the common room. She stood up when he entered, her eyes searching his face for answers. Is it true? She asked. Did you really do it? Daniel nodded. He was exhausted, more tired than he had ever been in his life. But there was also a strange lightness in his chest, a feeling of rightness. The princess is sleeping now. She has been sleeping for 3 hours. The Healers say it is the first real rest she has had since she was born. Lisa sat down heavily as if her legs could no longer support her weight. Do you have any idea what you have done? The Valorians are calling you a miracle worker. The Queen has declared you a friend of the Empire. There are already messages coming in from other worlds asking how you did it. Daniel sat down across from her. I did not do anything special. I just held a baby. Anyone could have done it. No, Lisa said softly. No, they could not. That is exactly the point. The Valorans could not do it. They do not know how. They have spent 10,000 years building an empire, conquering worlds, developing technology beyond our imagination. But they forgot something along the way, something that humans never lost. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. They forgot how to comfort their children. They forgot how to be warm. The negotiations resumed that afternoon, but everything was different now. Queen Sithara entered the chamber with her head held high, but when she looked at Daniel, there was no coldness in her eyes. There was respect. There was gratitude. There was something that might almost have been affection. The discussions that had been slow and difficult before now moved forward with surprising speed. The Valorans who had been suspicious and hostile were now curious and open. They asked questions about human family structures, about how human parents raise their children, about the strange rituals of holding and rocking and singing. By the end of the day, the framework of a peace treaty had been established. The border disputes would be resolved through negotiation, not war. Trade routes would be opened between human and Valoran space. Prisoners would be returned to their homes. The fighting that had cost so many lives would finally come to an end. But Queen Sithara was not finished. As the negotiations concluded, she stood from her throne and raised her 4 arms for silence. I wish to add something to this treaty, she announced, something that is not about borders or trade or military agreements. Something more important. The room fell silent. Every Ihuman and Valoran alike turned to the Queen. My people have achieved great things, she said. We have built ships that cross the galaxy. We have developed weapons that can destroy stars. We have conquered 1,000 worlds and created an empire that will last for 1,000,000 years. We believed that this made us superior, that other species, especially young species like humans, had nothing to teach us. She paused and looked directly at Daniel. We were wrong. Words hung in the air like a physical thing. Several of the Valoran advisors shifted uncomfortably, a queen admitting error was almost unheard of in their culture. In our pursuit of power and logic, we forgot something essential. Sithara continued, we forgot that there is strength in softness. We forgot that there is power in warmth. We forgot that the simple act of holding a child can accomplish what all our technology cannot. She stepped down from her throne, another unprecedented act, and walked toward the human delegation. She stopped in front of Daniel and looked down at him with eyes that held 1,000 years of wisdom and a single night of transformation. I am adding a clause to this treaty, she said, a formal request from the Valoran Empire. To the people of Earth, we wish to establish a cultural exchange program. We want human teachers to come to our worlds and show us what you know. We want to learn how you comfort your young, how you care for your sick, how you hold each other in times of pain. She reached out with one of her great arms and very gently touched Daniel's shoulder. It was the first time a Valorian royal had voluntarily touched human in recorded history. "We want to learn how to be warm." The chamber erupted in noise, whispers, gasps, the clicking of Lorian speech mixed with human exclamations of surprise, but Daniel barely heard any of it. He was looking up at the queen, seeing not the terrifying alien empress he had met 2 days ago, but a mother who had learned something new about love. "It would be our honor," he said simply. The treaty was signed the next day in a ceremony that was broadcast across the galaxy. Representatives from dozens of species watched as human and Valoran leaders pressed their marks onto the agreement that would end 50 years of war. But the moment that everyone remembered, the moment that would be studied and discussed for centuries to come, was when Queen Sarah lifted Princess Velith in her arms and held her the way Daniel had shown her, close against her chest, swaying gently, humming a melody she had learned from a human lullaby. The princess chirped happily, and across the galaxy, millions of beings watched in wonder. In the years that followed, human teachers traveled to Valoran worlds by the thousands. They built schools where they taught the ancient arts of holding and rocking and singing. They trained Valoran parents in the techniques that human mothers and fathers had passed down for generations. They showed the great empire that there was power in gentleness and strength in love. And slowly, gradually, something changed in Valoran society. Infant mortality rates dropped, mental health improved, crime and violence decreased. The cold, efficient empire began to develop something it had never had before: happiness. Daniel Carter returned to Earth after the treaty signing, but he did not stay long. Queen had invited him back as a permanent advisor, the first human to hold such a position in the Valorian government. He accepted, knowing that his work was not finished. There was still so much to teach, so much to share, so much healing to be done. He visited the princess often. As she grew up, she learned to call him by a Valoran word that translated roughly to warm one, or the one who holds. When she was old enough to understand, he told her the story of the night they met, how she had cried for hours and how he had cradled her against his chest until she finally found peace. She never forgot that story, and when she eventually became queen herself, she made sure that every child in the empire knew what humans had taught her people, that the strongest force in the universe was not weapons or technology or logic. Thought it was love, and it had come from the most unexpected place in the galaxy, a small, warm, primitive species called humans, who had never forgotten how to hold their children close.